Hello, this is Mr. Wolf, and today we are going to focus entirely on ways of finding common denominators. So when we are trying to add or subtract or even compare fractions, it's useful to have a common denominator. We cannot add or subtract without one. And so we're going to look at a lot of different strategies for coming up with a common denominator for our fractions. And the first and easiest one is always you can just take the two denominators you have. In this case, 4 and 6, and you can multiply them together. 4 times 6 is 24. And this tells me that both 4 and 6ths can be changed into 24ths. This is really quick. This is always going to be the fastest way to go. The problem here is this will not always find us our lowest common denominator, our LCD. So in this case, there's a smaller number than 24 that both of these could go into. So we can always do this, but chances are we'll have to simplify our fractions afterwards. So let's look at another strategy. Another thing we could do is simply list out the multiples of each of our numbers. So I could say, okay, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. And I'm going to stop at 24 because that's the one we know is going to match. So that's my multiples for the number 4. Now I'm going to look at my multiples for the number 6. And I'm going to stop the first time I see a connection. So it goes 6, 12, and look at that. I can stop right there because both of them go into 12. So this is my lowest common denominator. They both go into 24. But it takes a lot more to get 4 into 24 than it does to get 4 into 12. So here I found my lowest common denominator. This is a great strategy when you know that they share something. The problem is if they don't, you can be listing a ton. If we had 5 and 12, I would have to list 5 all the way to 5 times 12. Before I found something that linked with the 12s. But for something like this, it's a really good, quick way. And then the last, it's probably the most complicated, but the most precise method, is looking at our factors. So I can look at 4. And actually, let me write it underneath. So I have 4 and I have 6. And I know 4 is made up of 2 times 2. And I know 6 is made up of 2 times 3. And if I now multiplied straight across, I would get 24. I'd be finding what 4 times 6 is. But if I want to find the lowest common denominator, what I can do here is try to find what numbers do they share. And I'm going to look at this and I say, I see that both 4 and 6 have a 2. Right there in both 4 and 6. And because they share it, I only need to use it once. So I'm going to start by writing the number they share, 2. And I'm going to say, is there any other number they share? Nope, they just share that 2. So I'm going to multiply, and now I'm going to look for the numbers they don't share. Well, 4 has a 2 all on its own. 6 has a 3 all on its own. And now I've used all of my numbers. I've got the 2 that is shared, the 2 that is just from the 4, and the 3 that comes from the 6. And now I can multiply and say 2 times 2 is 4, times 3 is 12. and that is my lowest common denominator. So let's do all three of these strategies again, this time with a different set of fractions. Now we're looking at 5/9 and plus 1/12. So we're looking for a common denominator between 9ths and 12ths. The first thing we said we could do is we could just multiply. We could say 9 times 12. Now already we're looking at this and saying that's getting to be a big number. I'm hoping you have your math facts memorized and you can immediately tell me that 9 times 12 is 108. If you couldn't do it immediately, you could stack them up, or you could say, oh, I know 9 times 10 is 90, 9 times 2 is 18, 90 plus 18 is 108. So we could go for 108ths. That is going to be broken into a lot of pieces, which is why just multiplying our denominators is not always the best strategy. We said the next strategy we could go with was listing out our multiples. And so I'm going to go a distance out, but I'm not going to go all the way to 108ths because that's going to be a lot. I'm going to go 9, 18, 27, 36, 45, 54. And I'm going to stop there. If I find out I need more, I'll add in some more. And here I'm going to have my 12s. And I'm going to watch to see if I can get any of these. 12, 24, 36, and right there, I've made my connection. So 36 is my lowest common denominator. Finally, we can look at our factors. And so I have 9, and I have 12. And I know 9 is 3 times 3. I know 12 is 2 times 6, but 6 needs to be broken as well. I can say 6 is 2 times 3. So once again, now I've broken them all into prime factors. And I'm going to look to see what number do they share. And I notice that they share a 3. There's a 3 in 9 and a 3 in 12. Do they share anything else? No, they don't. So I'm going to start with the number they share, 3, times the numbers that only show up in my first one, which is the 9, and that is a 3, times the numbers that only show up in my second number, which is 12, and the 12 has a 2 and another 2. And now I can multiply. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 2 is 18. 18 times 2 is 36. So these were 3 different strategies for how we can find the common denominators of 2 fractions. I hope this was helpful.